Commander Sarah adjusted her crisp naval uniform one final time before stepping through the airlock of the Galactic Alliance flagship Sovereign's Pride. The massive vessel stretched for kilometers in every direction, its corridors bustling with beings from across the galaxy. Humans were still the members of the Alliance, barely 50 years since first contact, and Sarah could feel the weight of skeptical gazes following her every step. The assignment briefing had been clear. Report to Admiral for integration into the Third Fleet's command structure. What hadn't been mentioned was that she would be the first human to serve at this level in Alliance military hierarchy. The pressure was immense, but Sarah had faced worse odds before. As she navigated the ship's maze-like corridors, alien crew members stopped their conversations to stare. Though with their crystalline skin formations whispered among themselves in their harmonic language. A group of officers, their reptilian features twisted into expressions she couldn't quite read, blocked her path deliberately before moving aside with obvious reluctance. Sarah kept her expression neutral. She had learned long ago that showing weakness only invited more aggression. The lessons of her childhood on the colony world of New Shanghai had taught her that respect was earned through action, not given freely. The bridge of the Sovereign's Pride was a marvel of galactic engineering. Holographic displays showed tactical information from across 3-star systems, while officers from dozens of species coordinated fleet movements with practiced efficiency. At the center of it all stood Admiral, a towering whose 4 arms moved independently as he directed operations. "Admiral," Sarah announced her presence with a crisp salute. "Commander reporting for duty as requested." His compound eyes focused on her with the intensity of a predator sizing up potential prey. His mandibles clicked together in what she had learned was either amusement or annoyance. The translation protocols still struggled with emotional nuances. "So the humans send us a female," rumbled, his voice carrying the gravitational weight that came naturally to his species. "How? Quaint. Tell me, Commander, what makes you think a species that has barely mastered interplanetary travel belongs commanding vessels in the Alliance fleet?" The bridge fell silent. Sarah could feel dozens of eyes upon her, waiting to see how the human would respond to such an obvious challenge. She had expected this. The reports from other human officers had warned her about the prejudices she would face. "With respect, Admiral," Sarah replied, her voice steady and clear. "I believe my record speaks for itself. I'm here to serve the Alliance to the best of my abilities." A chittering sound arose from Lieutenant Commander, a spider-like arachnoid whose species was known for their tactical brilliance. "Record? What record could a human possibly have that would impress anyone here? Your species has fought exactly 0 interstellar conflicts. Unless you count skirmishes with pirates and raiders as military experience," added Captain Us, a massive whose people had been warriors for before humans had even discovered fire. "My hatchlings have seen more real combat." Sarah felt the familiar heat of anger building in her chest, but she pushed it down. Emotional responses would only validate their assumptions about human weakness. Instead, she simply nodded politely. "I understand your concerns. I hope to prove myself worthy of your confidence through my actions." The dismissive laughter that followed her words was like a physical blow. She had known this assignment would be challenging, but the casual contempt from beings she was supposed to work alongside was harder to bear than she had anticipated. Admiral gestured to a small alcove near the back of the bridge. "Your station, Commander. You will observe and learn. Perhaps in time you will understand the complexities of real military operations." The workstation they had assigned her was clearly an afterthought, a basic console with limited access to ship systems. It was the kind of position typically given to junior officers or diplomatic observers. Sarah bit back her response and took her seat, knowing that any protest would only reinforce their prejudices. Over the following days, the pattern of dismissal and subtle harassment continued. During tactical briefings, her suggestions were ignored or dismissed without consideration. In the officers' mess, conversations would stop when she approached, only to resume in languages her translator couldn't interpret once she had passed. The worst offender was Captain Us. The Massive seemed to take personal pleasure in undermining her at every opportunity. During a routine drill, he had publicly questioned her understanding of basic fleet maneuvers. When she had correctly predicted the outcome of a tactical simulation, he had attributed it to lucky guessing. "Humans," he had announced loudly enough for half the bridge to hear, are naturally cautious creatures. It makes them seem clever sometimes, but in real combat, caution gets you killed. Sarah maintained her professional demeanor, but inside, she was keeping careful track of every slight, every dismissive comment, every assumption about human capabilities. These beings had no idea what humanity had endured to reach the stars, what trials had forged her people into something harder than they imagined. The breaking point came during the third week of her assignment. The Third Fleet was conducting war games near the Helix Nebula, practicing coordination between different species' tactical doctrines. Sarah had been relegated to monitoring communications traffic, essentially a glorified radio operator's position. She watched as the exercise unfolded, noting the inefficiencies in the Alliance formation. The cruisers were maintaining too tight a formation for their energy weapons to fire effectively. The destroyers were operating outside optimal support range of their capital ships. Most critically, the arachnoid tactical officers were implementing a defensive strategy that left their flanks exposed to the kind of assault tactics humans had perfected during the Earth-Mars conflicts. Sarah submitted her observations through proper channels, only to have them bounced back with a note that junior observers should focus on learning rather than critiquing established doctrine. The mock battle proceeded exactly as she had predicted. The simulated enemy force, controlled by Alliance AI systems, exploited the formation weaknesses she had identified. Within 2 hours, the Third Fleet had suffered catastrophic losses in the exercise. As the post-battle analysis began, Admiral's mood grew increasingly dark. "Unacceptable," he growled, reviewing the casualty reports. "We lost 40% of our effective strength to an AI opponent programmed with standard assault patterns." "Sir," Sarah spoke up from her station, "I submitted a tactical analysis before the engagement that identified the vulnerabilities the AI exploited." The bridge turned to stare at her. Captain Us's laugh was particularly harsh. "You think you spotted something that our tactical specialists missed? The arrogance of these humans is astounding." Admiral studied his displays with growing irritation. "Show me this analysis." Sarah transmitted her original report to the main display. The bridge officers gathered around as she highlighted the formation flaws and predicted attack vectors. Every single one had been exploited during the exercise. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Lieutenant Commander was the first to speak, her voice carefully neutral. "The analysis is remarkably accurate." "Lucky guesswork," Captain Us insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Admiral studied the data for several long moments. "Commander, you will prepare a detailed tactical review for tomorrow's briefing. I want to understand how you reached these conclusions." That evening, Sarah worked late into the night shift, preparing her presentation. She had access to historical human military documents that the Alliance had never studied, records of conflicts that had shaped her species' approach to warfare. Earth's bloody history of constant conflict had taught humans lessons that species who had achieved interstellar travel through cooperation had never needed to learn. The next morning's briefing room was packed with senior officers from across the fleet. Sarah stood before beings whose species had mastered faster-than-light travel before humans had invented the wheel, and she prepared to show them something they had never seen before. "The fundamental difference," Sarah began, activating her presentation, "between human tactical doctrine and Alliance standard practice is our assumption of enemy competence. Human military theory operates under the principle that your opponent will identify and exploit any weakness you present." She displayed comparative analyses of human conflicts, the devastating lessons of the Martian Rebellion, the tactical evolution of the Belt Wars, the catastrophic failures that had taught humanity to never underestimate an enemy's capability for innovation and adaptation. Alliance doctrine appears to assume that superior technology and firepower will overcome tactical disadvantages. Human experience suggests that assumption is often fatal. Admiral leaned forward in his chair. "Continue." Sarah spent the next hour demonstrating how human tactical principles could be integrated with Alliance operational doctrine. She showed how Earth's history of asymmetric warfare had produced strategies that could be scaled up to fleet-level engagements. Most importantly, she demonstrated how her seemingly simple observations from the previous day were actually the product of analytical frameworks developed over centuries of human conflict. When she finished, the briefing room was silent. Lieutenant Commander was the first to speak. These tactical innovations, your species developed these through actual combat experience. Yes, ma'am. Human civilization has been in a state of almost constant warfare for most of our recorded history. It taught us to think like our enemies, to assume they would find ways to hurt us that we hadn't considered. Captain Us shifted uncomfortably. Surely you're exaggerating the extent of human conflict. Sarah looked directly at him, her expression deadly serious. Captain, in the past 1,000 years, there have been fewer than 50 years of total peace on Earth. And that's just internal human conflicts. It doesn't include our wars with the Martian independence movements or the Belt Pirate Confederations. The implications hung heavy in the air. These beings were looking at a representative of a species that had learned to wage war as a fundamental survival skill. Everything about human civilization had been shaped by the necessity of preparing for the next conflict. Admiral studied her with new interest. Your service record, Commander. I reviewed the basic details, but I suspect there are aspects that require clarification. Sarah straightened her shoulders. She had known this moment would come eventually. What would you like to know, sir? Your previous assignment was listed as Colonial Security Operations. What does that mean in human terms? The question she had been dreading, but also the one she had been prepared for since accepting this assignment. Sarah took a breath and prepared to explain exactly what kind of experience she brought to the Alliance fleet. For the past 8 years, I commanded the escort squadron responsible for protecting human colony ships and supply convoys in the Outer Rim. The region is controlled by 3 separate pirate confederations who specialize in capturing vessels for slave labor and resource extraction. She paused, letting the implications sink in before continuing. My squadron of 12 light cruisers was responsible for protecting an area of space larger than the Sol system, against opponents who knew those regions better than we did, who outnumbered us consistently, and who had no constraints on their tactics or weapons use. Admiral's compound eyes focused intently on her. Engagement statistics. Over 8 years, we escorted 847 vessels through contested space. We lost 3 ships to enemy action. Enemy losses included 23 confirmed vessel destructions and 67 vessels captured or disabled. The numbers seemed to echo in the sudden silence of the briefing room. Lieutenant Commander performed rapid calculations on her personal display. That represents a loss ratio of approximately 8-to-1 in your favor, while protecting civilian vessels against an enemy with tactical and numerical advantages. Yes, ma'am. Captain Us leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful for the first time since she had arrived. What was your largest single engagement? Sarah had known this question would come as well. The Battle of Station. 43 enemy vessels attempted to capture a medical supply convoy bound for the New Geneva colony. We had 6 ships. 43 against 6, Admiral repeated slowly. What was the outcome? We destroyed 18 enemy vessels and captured 11 more. The convoy reached New Geneva intact. We lost 1 ship with minimal crew casualties. The silence that followed was different from the dismissive quiet she had grown accustomed to. This was the silence of professional military officers absorbing information that forced them to fundamentally reconsider their assumptions. Sarah continued, her voice steady and matter-of-fact. Human military doctrine emphasizes that numerical superiority means nothing if you can't bring those numbers to bear effectively. We developed our tactics based on the assumption that we would always be outnumbered, and she activated another display, showing the tactical breakdown of the station engagement. The enemy expected a standard fighting withdrawal, the kind of cautious defensive action that Alliance doctrine would recommend. Instead, we used our superior coordination and tactical flexibility to divide their force and defeat it in detail. Admiral studied the tactical display with the intensity of a predator examining successful hunting techniques. You're describing warfare at a level of intensity that most Alliance species haven't experienced since achieving interstellar capability. Yes, sir, humans are newer to space-based civilization. We haven't had time to develop the diplomatic solutions that allowed other species to avoid major conflicts. We've had to learn to fight and win while building our infrastructure. Lieutenant Commander's analytical nature was clearly engaged. The tactical innovations you demonstrated yesterday, they're derived from this combat experience. Partly, also from historical human conflicts dating back thousands of years. We maintain extensive military academies specifically dedicated to studying successful and unsuccessful tactical approaches from our entire history. Captain Us finally spoke, his tone much more respectful than before. Commander, you said you lost only 3 ships in 8 years of operations. How many enemy vessels did you face in total? Sarah consulted her personal records. Approximately 400 confirmed hostile contacts, with an estimated 200 additional vessels that before engagement. Our intelligence estimates suggested we were facing roughly 1,200 active enemy vessels across all 3 confederations. The mathematics were stark. A small human squadron had been systematically destroying or capturing enemy forces at an unsustainable rate. No wonder the Outer Rim had become significantly safer for human civilian traffic. Admiral stood slowly, his full height imposing even among the diverse species present. Commander, you will prepare a comprehensive briefing on human tactical doctrine for presentation to the entire fleet command staff. I want detailed analysis of how these approaches can be integrated with Alliance operational frameworks. Yes, sir. Furthermore, he continued, you will assume duties as Deputy Tactical Coordinator for the 3rd Fleet effective immediately. Your previous assignment was insufficient to utilize your capabilities properly. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction but kept her expression professional. Thank you, Admiral. I won't disappoint you. As the briefing concluded and officers began filing out, Sarah noticed the change in atmosphere immediately. The dismissive glances had been replaced by careful, measuring looks. Species that had ignored her presence were now nodding respectfully as they passed. Captain Us approached her directly, his massive frame no longer seeming quite as intimidating. Commander, I owe you an apology. I made assumptions based on incomplete information. No apology necessary, Captain. I understand your perspective. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, you could explain something to me. Yesterday, when I questioned your understanding of fleet maneuvers, you simply accepted the criticism. Why didn't you mention your combat record then? Sarah considered her answer carefully. Because proving my worth through argument would have accomplished nothing. Humans have a saying, actions speak louder than words. I preferred to let my work demonstrate my capabilities. Us nodded slowly. Your species has an interesting approach to earning respect. We've learned that respect given too easily is usually worthless. Respect earned through demonstrated competence tends to last longer. As she made her way back to her quarters, which she suspected would be upgraded soon, Sarah reflected on the day's events. The real test was still ahead. Tomorrow, she would begin implementing human tactical doctrine on a scale never attempted before. The 3rd Fleet was about to learn exactly what humans were capable of when given proper authority and resources. The transformation of the 3rd Fleet began 3 days after Sarah's appointment as Deputy Tactical Coordinator. Admiral had given her unprecedented authority to restructure fleet formations and training protocols. But Sarah knew that authority meant nothing without the respect of the officers who would implement her strategies. Her first major challenge came during a routine patrol mission near the Crimson Nebula. Intelligence reports suggested increased pirate activity in the region, but the 3rd Fleet's standard patrol formation was designed more for intimidation than actual combat effectiveness. Sarah studied the deployment patterns from her new position on the bridge, noting the same tactical weaknesses that had plagued their recent exercises. Admiral, she said during the morning briefing, I recommend we modify our patrol formation to account for the terrain advantages the nebula provides to smaller, more maneuverable vessels. Admiral gestured for her to continue. The other senior officers around the tactical display showed varying degrees of interest and skepticism. Standard Alliance formation assumes open space engagement with equivalent force structures. The Crimson Nebula's electromagnetic interference and dense particle fields favor hit-and-run tactics. Pirates operating here will use the nebula itself as cover. Captain Us, who had become increasingly supportive since learning about her combat record, studied her proposed formation changes. You're suggesting we split our battle line into independent hunter groups. Exactly. 3-ship teams with mixed capabilities. 1 capital ship for firepower, 2 escorts for pursuit and reconnaissance. The groups coordinate through quantum entanglement communicators to maintain contact despite the interference. Lieutenant Commander's arachnoid limbs clicked rapidly as she processed the tactical implications. This formation would leave us vulnerable to concentrated attack by superior forces. Sarah nodded acknowledgement. Under normal circumstances, yes, but human experience with asymmetric warfare suggests that pirates rarely have the discipline or coordination to mount concentrated attacks. They rely on numerical superiority and ambush tactics. By dividing into hunter groups, we deny them both advantages. Commander, an officer known for his conservative tactical philosophy, raised his crystalline crest in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of concern. Commander, this approach seems excessively aggressive for a patrol mission. Alliance doctrine emphasizes measured responses and diplomatic solutions. With respect, Commander, Sarah replied, diplomatic solutions require an opponent willing to negotiate. Pirates in the Outer Rim don't respond to diplomatic approaches. They respond to demonstrated strength and overwhelming tactical superiority. Admiral considered the proposals carefully. Implement the formation changes for this patrol. We will evaluate effectiveness based on results. The new formation deployed 2 hours later, with Sarah temporarily assigned to the hunter group led by Captain Us aboard the heavy cruiser Dominant Will. The other officers had initially assumed her assignment was for observation and learning, but Us had requested her as his tactical advisor, a significant gesture of respect from the proud warrior. The Dominant Will moved through the nebula's outer edges with its 2 escort vessels, the arachnoid destroyer Webwalker and the human-built frigate Shanghai Express. Sarah had specifically requested the human vessel for this mission, knowing its crew would be more familiar with the tactical approaches she intended to demonstrate. Contact, announced Lieutenant from the sensor station. Multiple vessels, approximately 15, moving to intercept the merchant convoy at Grid 77 Alpha. Sarah studied the tactical display, noting the pirates' approach vector and formation. They're using a standard wolf pack strategy. Surround the convoy, disable the escorts, capture the merchants. Predictable but effective against traditional Alliance defensive formations. Captain Us rumbled his agreement. How do you recommend we respond? We don't protect the convoy directly, Sarah said, causing surprised looks from several bridge officers. We eliminate the threat before it can engage. Hunter Group 2 is positioned to cut off their retreat route. Hunter Group 3 can flank them from the nebula's interference zone. We hit them from 3 directions simultaneously. But what about the convoy? Asked Commander, the second officer. The convoy maintains course and speed. If we execute properly, the pirates never get close enough to threaten them. Captain Us studied Sarah's proposed attack pattern. This is considerably more aggressive than standard Alliance engagement protocols. Human military doctrine assumes that the best defense is preventing the enemy from attacking in the first place. We call it aggressive defense. Eliminate threats before they can become dangerous. The attack proceeded exactly as Sarah had planned. Hunter Group 2 emerged from the nebula's electromagnetic shadow to cut off the pirates' escape route, while Hunter Group 3 positioned itself to flank the enemy formation. The pirates, expecting to face a single escort group defending a stationary convoy, suddenly found themselves surrounded by coordinated Alliance forces attacking from multiple directions. The engagement lasted 18 minutes. 12 pirate vessels were destroyed, 3 were captured for intelligence purposes, and the remainder fled deeper into the nebula. The merchant convoy never came under direct threat, arriving at its destination with minimal delay and no casualties. Admiral's response to the mission report was immediate and decisive. All fleet hunter groups will implement Commander's tactical protocols effective immediately. Additionally, I want detailed analysis of how these approaches can be scaled up to major fleet engagements. The success of the Crimson Nebula operation marked a turning point in how the Third Fleet viewed human tactical contributions. Officers who had previously dismissed Sarah's suggestions began requesting her input on their own missions. The change was most evident in the daily tactical briefings, where her analyses were no longer met with skepticism, but with careful attention and follow-up questions. However, not everyone was pleased with the rapid changes to established doctrine. Commander had been increasingly vocal about his concerns regarding what he termed excessive militarization of Alliance operations. Admiral, he said during a senior staff meeting, I must express serious reservations about adopting human tactical approaches so extensively. The alliance has maintained peace for centuries through diplomatic engagement and measured responses. These aggressive strategies risk escalating minor incidents into major conflicts. Admiral's compound eyes focused on the officer. Are you questioning the effectiveness of the new protocols? I'm questioning their necessity. The human approach to problem-solving appears to default to violence rather than seeking diplomatic alternatives. Sarah felt the familiar heat of anger at the implied criticism of her species, but she forced herself to remain calm. Commander, human tactical doctrine doesn't reject diplomatic solutions. It simply prepares for situations where diplomacy has already failed. But by preparing for violence, do you not make violence more likely? In my experience, Sarah replied carefully, being unprepared for violence makes it inevitable. Pirates and raiders don't attack targets they believe can defeat them decisively. Demonstrating superior tactical capability prevents conflicts rather than causing them. Lieutenant Commander supported Sarah's position with typical arachnoid logic. Statistical analysis supports Commander's assessment. Pirate activity in sectors where human tactical protocols have been implemented has decreased by 43%. Commander's crystalline crest dimmed, a sign of frustration among his people. Statistics can be misleading. What about the long-term implications of adopting such an aggressive military posture? Captain Us, whose respect for human military capabilities had grown considerably, addressed his colleague directly. I understand your concerns, but you're missing the essential point. Human tactical doctrine isn't about seeking conflict. It's about ending conflicts quickly and decisively when they become unavoidable. Furthermore, Admiral added, the reduction in pirate activity means fewer civilian casualties and reduced economic disruption. The aggressive tactics are achieving peaceful outcomes more effectively than our previous approaches. The debate was interrupted by an urgent communication from Alliance Command. Admiral accepted the transmission on the main briefing room display, revealing the imposing figure of Fleet Admiral, the highest-ranking officer in Alliance space. Admiral's voice carried the gravitational weight of absolute authority. The Third Fleet is being reassigned to immediate combat operations. A major pirate confederation has established a fortified base in the Helix system and is threatening critical supply routes to 3 colony worlds. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of operation where human tactical doctrine would prove its value on a large scale. Intelligence estimates suggest approximately 80 enemy vessels of various classes, supported by orbital defense platforms and asteroid-based weapon emplacements, Fleet Admiral continued. Previous Alliance operations against fortified positions have proven unsuccessful. I am told that the Third Fleet has developed new tactical approaches that may be more effective. Admiral glanced at Sarah before responding. We have implemented significant improvements to our operational doctrine, Admiral. We can be ready for deployment within 12 hours. Excellent. However, I must emphasize that this operation carries significant political implications. The systems under threat include New Geneva, one of the primary human colonies. Failure to protect human civilian populations would severely damage Alliance credibility with your member species. After the communication ended, the briefing room erupted in discussion. The scale of the operation was unprecedented for the Third Fleet, and the political stakes were enormous. 80 enemy vessels, Commander said quietly, plus fixed defenses. This is exactly the kind of major escalation I was concerned about. The escalation already occurred, Sarah pointed out. The pirates chose to establish a fortified base and threaten civilian populations. We're responding to their escalation, not creating it. Admiral stood to address the assembled officers. This operation will test everything we have learned about integrated tactical doctrine. Commander, I want a preliminary assault plan within 4 hours. Yes, sir. I'll need detailed intelligence on the enemy positions and a complete assessment of our available forces. As the meeting concluded and officers dispersed to their preparations, Captain Us approached Sarah privately. This is what you've been preparing for, isn't it? A chance to demonstrate human tactical doctrine on a scale that will settle the debate about its value. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Human military history teaches us that the best time to prove a new strategy works is when the stakes are highest. If our approaches can succeed against a fortified enemy with superior numbers, they'll work anywhere. And if they fail? Then humans will take the blame for overconfidence and aggressive tactics. Commander will probably get promoted for his warnings about militarization. Us's reptilian features arranged themselves into what Sarah had learned was a smile. No pressure then. That evening, Sarah worked through the night developing an assault plan unlike anything the Alliance had attempted before. The traditional approach to attacking fortified positions relied on overwhelming firepower and gradual reduction of enemy defenses. Human doctrine suggested a completely different strategy, one that would either validate everything she had been teaching or destroy her credibility permanently. The plan she developed was audacious even by human standards. Instead of a direct assault on the strongest enemy positions, she proposed a complex multi-phase operation that would use the pirates' own defensive advantages against them. Phase 1 involved using electronic warfare to disrupt enemy communications and coordination. Phase 2 would employ hunter groups to eliminate patrol vessels and isolate the main base from external support. Phase 3 was the most controversial, a direct assault on what appeared to be the weakest section of enemy defenses, which intelligence suggested was actually a trap designed to lure Alliance forces into a kill zone. Sarah's plan called for deliberately walking into that trap, then using the pirates' own ambush tactics against them when they moved to spring it. When she presented the plan to Admiral and the senior staff the next morning, the reaction was immediate and intense. "You want us to deliberately attack where the enemy expects us to attack?" Commander's voice carried disbelief and concern. "The enemy has prepared their defenses based on Alliance tactical doctrine," Sarah explained. "They expect us to avoid obvious traps and seek alternative approaches. By attacking where they want us to attack, but not how they expect us to attack, we turn their preparations against them." Lieutenant Commander performed rapid calculations. "The casualty estimates for this approach are significant." "Lower than traditional siege approaches," Sarah countered, "and the operation completes in days rather than months. Speed saves lives in the long term." Admiral studied the plan carefully. "Explain the critical decision points." Sarah activated detailed tactical displays. "The key is recognizing when the enemy moves to spring their trap. Human combat experience suggests they'll commit their mobile reserves to exploit what they believe is our mistake. That's when we hit them with our real assault force. And if your assessment of enemy behavior is incorrect, then we'll have excellent intelligence about their actual tactical capabilities, and we can adapt accordingly." Human military doctrine emphasizes tactical flexibility over rigid adherence to predetermined plans. The debate continued for 2 hours, with various officers raising legitimate concerns about the plan's complexity and risks. Finally, Admiral made his decision. "We implement Commander's plan with modifications to reduce risk exposure during the initial phases. However, the overall strategy remains as proposed." Commander made one final objection. "Admiral, this operation represents a fundamental departure from Alliance military doctrine. Are we certain we want to base such a critical mission on the untested theories of the member species?" Admiral's response was definitive. "Commander, the current Alliance military doctrine has failed to adequately address pirate threats in the Outer Rim. Human approaches have achieved measurable success where our traditional methods have not. This operation will determine whether those successes can be scaled up to major fleet operations." As the Third Fleet prepared for deployment to the Helix system, Sarah knew that the next few days would determine not only the fate of the threatened colonies, but also the future role of humans within the Alliance military structure. Everything she had learned during 8 years of fighting in the Outer Rim would be put to the ultimate test. The Third Fleet arrived at the edge of the Helix system 18 hours later, faced with a tactical nightmare that justified every concern Commander had raised about human military doctrine. The Pirate Confederation had transformed the outer asteroid belt into a fortress that would have challenged even the Alliance's most experienced siege specialists. Sarah stood beside Admiral on the bridge of the Sovereign's Pride, studying the reconnaissance data with growing appreciation for their enemy's tactical sophistication. This wasn't a ragtag collection of opportunistic raiders. Someone with genuine military expertise had designed these defenses. 83 confirmed vessels, reported Lieutenant Commander, her arachnoid limbs dancing across multiple sensor displays simultaneously. 15 heavy cruiser class, 37 destroyer class, and 31 lighter vessels. Additionally, 42 defensive platforms embedded in asteroid formations and at least 12 major weapons emplacements. Captain Us studied the deployment patterns with professional interest. Whoever designed this understands Alliance tactical doctrine thoroughly. They've positioned their strongest units to counter every standard approach we might attempt. Sarah activated her personal tactical display, overlaying human combat experience against the enemy formation. The pattern that emerged was troubling and familiar. "Admiral," she said carefully, "this fortress design shows clear influence from human defensive strategies. Someone has been studying our colonial security operations and adapting our techniques for large-scale operations." Admiral's compound eyes focused intently on her analysis. "Explain." "The layered defense zones, the use of terrain to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones, the positioning of mobile reserves to exploit tactical mistakes. These are all approaches humans developed for defending against superior numbers." Commander's crystalline crest brightened with concern. "Are you suggesting that human tactical knowledge has been compromised?" "More likely, someone has been studying our combat records and learning from them. The question is whether they've learned our defensive approaches well enough to predict our offensive capabilities." The implications were serious. If the enemy understood human tactical doctrine, Sarah's assault plan would need fundamental revision. Everything depended on catching the pirates unprepared for human-style aggressive tactics. "Update your assault plan based on this new intelligence," Admiral ordered. "I want alternatives prepared for multiple contingencies." Sarah spent the next 4 hours completely reconstructing her approach. The original plan had assumed enemies who understood Alliance doctrine but had no experience with human military theory. Facing opponents who had studied both traditions required something entirely different. The solution she developed was typically human. If the enemy expected sophisticated tactics, give them something so simple and direct that complexity became a disadvantage. "We're going to attack everything at once," Sarah announced during the revised tactical briefing. The silence that followed was profound. Even Captain Us, who had become her strongest supporter among the senior officers, looked skeptical. "Everything," Admiral repeated. "Every defensive position, every asteroid fortress, every mobile unit. Simultaneous assault across the entire system using maximum aggression and minimum tactical sophistication." Commander's objection was immediate. "That's not tactics, that's barely controlled chaos. Alliance forces don't operate that way." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "The enemy has prepared for sophisticated Alliance tactics and aggressive human tactics. They haven't prepared for Alliance forces using human brute force approaches." She activated system-wide tactical displays, showing the proposed attack pattern. "We divide the fleet into 18 independent assault groups, each with specific target assignments. No complex coordination, no subtle maneuvering, no tactical finesse. Each group attacks its assigned target with maximum available firepower until the target is eliminated or the group is destroyed." Lieutenant Commander performed rapid probability calculations. "The casualty projections for this approach are significant." "But the operation concludes in less than 6 hours," Sarah countered. "Traditional siege approaches would take weeks and ultimately result in higher casualties as the enemy calls in reinforcements." Admiral studied the plan with the intensity of a predator evaluating hunting strategies. "You're proposing to deliberately sacrifice tactical sophistication for speed and shock effect. Human military history demonstrates that overwhelming simultaneous pressure prevents enemies from implementing defensive strategies that depend on coordinated response. If they can't coordinate their defenses, their superior numbers become irrelevant." Captain Us was beginning to understand the logic. By attacking everything simultaneously, we prevent them from concentrating their forces against any single assault group. "More importantly," Sarah continued, "we deny them the opportunity to execute the complex defensive strategies they've clearly prepared. Sophisticated tactics require time and coordination. We're not giving them either." The debate that followed was intense. Commander argued passionately that the approach was reckless and would result in unnecessary casualties. Several other senior officers expressed concerns about abandoning the careful tactical approaches that had served the Alliance for centuries. However, the mathematics were compelling. Sarah's analysis demonstrated that traditional siege approaches would take significantly longer and ultimately cost more lives, as the pirates received reinforcements from other systems. The brutal directness of simultaneous assault offered the best chance of quick victory. Admiral made his decision after 2 hours of discussion. We implement Commander's assault plan. However, I want detailed contingency protocols for tactical adaptation if initial results prove unfavorable. Understood, sir, Sarah replied. Human doctrine emphasizes that no plan survives contact with the enemy unchanged, will adapt as necessary based on results. The attack began 6 hours later, with the Third Fleet dividing into 18 assault groups as Sarah had proposed. Each group consisted of mixed alliance vessels under commanders who had been briefed on the specific tactical approaches required for their targets. Sarah positioned herself aboard the dominant will with Captain Us, assigned to assault the Central Command asteroid that intelligence suggested housed the pirates' primary coordination center. Their group consisted of 6 ships, 3 Alliance heavy cruisers, and 3 human frigates that had been specifically requested for their crew familiarity with aggressive assault tactics. All groups report ready, announced the communications officer. Assault commences in 30 seconds. Sarah watched the tactical displays showing the positions of all 18 assault groups. In 30 seconds, the Alliance would attempt something unprecedented, a coordinated attack of such scope and intensity that no defensive strategy could address all threats simultaneously. Begin assault, Admiral's voice echoed across all fleet channels. What followed was unlike any naval engagement in Alliance history. Instead of the careful, methodical approaches that characterized traditional fleet operations, 18 separate battles erupted simultaneously across the Helix system. The tactical display became a bewildering constellation of weapon discharges, ship movements, and rapidly changing threat assessments. Sarah's group targeted the command asteroid with tactics that would have horrified Alliance tactical instructors. Rather than attempting to neutralize defensive weapons systematically, the assault group simply charged directly at the heavily fortified position, accepting defensive fire while concentrating all offensive capability on the asteroid's primary shield generators. Defensive fire intensifying, reported the tactical officer aboard the dominant will. Forward armor holding, but we're taking significant damage. Maintain course and speed, Captain Us ordered. Continue firing on primary target. The approach Sarah had designed deliberately traded defensive maneuvering for offensive focus. Instead of attempting to minimize damage received, the assault groups were instructed to maximize damage delivered. It was a typically human calculation. Better to eliminate threats quickly than to preserve ships while enemies had time to coordinate responses. The strategy proved devastatingly effective. Across the system, pirate defensive positions found themselves under assault by Alliance forces that ignored traditional tactical doctrine completely. Defensive strategies that depended on channeling attacking forces into kill zones became useless when those forces refused to maneuver defensively. Enemy command center shields failing, announced the sensor officer. Recommend shifting target to weapons emplacements. Negative, Sarah replied firmly. Continue firing on shield generators until complete failure, then target command and control systems exclusively. Captain Us glanced at her questioningly, but transmitted the orders without comment. Human tactical doctrine emphasized destroying enemy coordination before eliminating individual weapons, disable the brain before worrying about the claws. The assault on the command asteroid took 43 minutes from initial contact to complete neutralization. The pirate defensive strategy, which depended on coordinated response to Alliance attacks, collapsed when their command structure was eliminated before they could implement countermeasures. Similar results were reported from assault groups across the system. The pirates had prepared for sophisticated tactical engagements that would allow them to coordinate defensive responses. They had not prepared for 18 simultaneous simple attacks that prevented coordination entirely. System-wide tactical update, Lieutenant Commander announced from the Fleet Command Channel. 15 of 18 assault groups report successful target elimination. 2 groups report heavy casualties but continuing engagement. 1 group requests assistance against unexpectedly heavy resistance. Sarah studied the tactical summary with professional satisfaction. The operation was proceeding exactly as human military doctrine predicted. Overwhelming simultaneous pressure was preventing the enemy from implementing the sophisticated defensive strategies they had clearly prepared. Admiral to all assault groups, the fleet commander's voice carried across fleet communications. Enemy forces are attempting to withdraw to fallback positions in the inner system. Continue aggressive pursuit. Do not allow regrouping opportunities. The pursuit phase of the engagement demonstrated another human tactical principle. Never allow a defeated enemy time to reorganize. Traditional alliance doctrine emphasized measured pursuit to minimize casualties, but Sarah's approach called for maintaining pressure until enemy resistance was completely eliminated. The final phase of the battle lasted another 2 hours, as alliance forces systematically eliminated fleeing pirate vessels and remaining defensive positions. The enemy's sophisticated defensive strategy, which might have succeeded against traditional alliance approaches, proved useless against the overwhelming directness of human-influence tactics. When the engagement concluded, the results were extraordinary. The Pirate Confederation had lost 78 of 83 vessels, all 42 defensive platforms, and all major weapon emplacements. Alliance casualties included 11 vessels destroyed and 27 requiring significant repairs, substantial losses, but far lower than projected casualties for traditional siege approaches. Admiral's fleet-wide announcement summarized the operation's success. The Helix system has been cleared of hostile forces. Colonial supply routes are secure. All assault groups report mission objectives achieved. However, the most significant result wasn't military, it was political. The successful operation using human tactical doctrine sent a clear message throughout Alliance space about the value of humanity's military contributions. Commander approached Sarah privately after the battle, his crystalline features displaying what she had learned was grudging respect. "Commander, I owe you a formal apology. Your tactical approaches achieved results that I believed impossible." "No apology necessary, Commander. Your concerns about casualty levels were legitimate. But your assessment of enemy capabilities and required responses proved accurate. I underestimated the effectiveness of what you term aggressive simplicity." Sarah nodded politely. Human military experience teaches us that sometimes the most sophisticated strategy is knowing when not to be sophisticated. The return journey to Alliance space was markedly different from the Third Fleet's outbound voyage. Sarah found herself at the center of tactical discussions rather than being excluded from them. Officers who had previously dismissed human contributions were now requesting detailed briefings on historical human conflicts and tactical innovations. Most significantly, Admiral announced major changes to Alliance military doctrine based on the Helix system operation. Human tactical approaches will be integrated into standard Alliance training protocols. Commander will oversee the development of combined doctrinal frameworks for implementation fleet-wide. The announcement represented a fundamental shift in how the Alliance viewed human military capabilities. From reluctant acceptance of humanity's member status, the military hierarchy had moved to active integration of human expertise into core operational doctrine. But Sarah knew the real test was still ahead. The successful operation had proven human tactics effective against pirate forces, but major interstellar conflicts involved opponents with resources and capabilities far beyond anything humanity had yet faced. As the Third Fleet prepared to return to normal operations, Sarah began developing training protocols that would prepare Alliance forces for the larger challenges she suspected they would face in the near future. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's role in those changes was just beginning to be understood. 3 months after the Helix system operation, Commander Sarah found herself in a position she had never anticipated, serving as the Alliance's primary military liaison to the Galactic Security Council. The transformation from dismissed junior officer to key strategic advisor had been remarkably swift, but Sarah understood that her new responsibilities came with equally remarkable challenges. The conference room aboard the Alliance flagship Unity's Promise was packed with representatives from across known space. Sarah took her designated seat at the strategic planning table, still adjusting to being included among beings whose species had mastered interstellar travel before humans had discovered agriculture. Fleet Admiral opened the briefing with characteristic directness. The situation in the Outer Rim has deteriorated significantly since our successful operation in the Helix system. Intelligence suggests the remaining pirate confederations have begun coordinating their activities in response to Alliance tactical improvements. Sarah studied the intelligence summaries with growing concern. The pirates weren't simply adapting, they were evolving. Someone with sophisticated military expertise was teaching them to counter the aggressive tactics that had proven so effective in recent operations. Furthermore, Admiral continued, we have confirmed reports of military-grade vessels and equipment being provided to pirate forces by unknown benefactors. This represents a significant escalation in threat capability. Ambassador, the senior diplomatic representative, expressed the concerns that Sarah knew were shared by many Alliance officials. The increasing militarization of our responses to pirate activity may be encouraging this escalation. Perhaps diplomatic engagement would be more productive than continued military action. Sarah had expected this debate. The success of human tactical doctrine had created political tensions within the Alliance, where many member species preferred diplomatic solutions to military ones. Ambassador, Sarah replied respectfully, human experience suggests that escalating military capabilities among hostile forces usually indicates external support rather than response to defensive measures. Someone is deliberately enhancing pirate military capabilities for reasons that probably extend beyond simple criminal activity. Admiral, who had become one of Sarah's strongest supporters since the Helix operation, activated detailed tactical displays. Commander's assessment aligns with intelligence analysis. The equipment being provided to pirate forces includes advanced sensor systems, military-grade weapons, and coordination technologies that suggest state-level support. The implications were serious. If a major power was secretly supporting pirate activity in the Outer Rim, the Alliance faced a much larger threat than simple criminal activity. Sarah had seen similar patterns during the Belt Wars, when external powers had used proxy forces to test human defensive capabilities before launching direct attacks. The question, said General or the military representative, is how we identify and respond to this external threat without triggering the larger conflict that our opponents may be seeking. Sarah activated her personal tactical display, showing a comprehensive analysis she had been developing since receiving the intelligence reports. General, human military history suggests that proxy conflicts are designed to test defensive capabilities and identify tactical weaknesses. The appropriate response is to demonstrate capabilities that discourage direct confrontation. Meaning, we need to eliminate pirate forces so decisively that their external supporters conclude direct military action would be unsuccessful. Overwhelming tactical superiority discourages escalation more effectively than diplomatic concessions. Ambassador's crystalline features showed clear disagreement. Commander, your species' approach to problem-solving seems to consistently favor military solutions over diplomatic ones. This tendency concerns many Alliance member species. Sarah had anticipated this criticism as well. Ambassador, humans don't prefer military solutions. We prefer solutions that actually work. Our history teaches us that diplomatic approaches are most effective when supported by demonstrated military capability. But doesn't military demonstration risk escalating conflicts unnecessarily? In human experience, potential opponents respect strength more than they fear aggression. Showing capability to win decisively prevents conflicts more effectively than showing willingness to compromise. Fleet Admiral interrupted the philosophical debate with practical concerns. Regardless of preferred approaches, we must address the immediate tactical situation. Commander, what do you recommend for dealing with enhanced pirate capabilities? Sarah had been preparing for this question since receiving the intelligence summaries. The answer required explaining human military concepts that the Alliance had never needed to consider. We need to implement what humans call escalation dominance, maintaining tactical and technological advantages that discourage opponents from believing they can achieve military objectives through increased aggression. She activated system-wide tactical displays showing current Alliance force deployments. Currently, Alliance forces respond to pirate activity. Human doctrine suggests proactive engagement that eliminates threats before they can coordinate with external supporters. Admiral studied her proposed operational changes. You're suggesting offensive operations against pirate bases rather than defensive protection of shipping. Exactly. Instead of waiting for attacks and responding to them, we identify pirate concentrations and eliminate them before they can threaten alliance interests. This approach denies external supporters the opportunity to test our defensive capabilities through proxy engagements. General Orr's reptilian features arranged into what Sarah had learned was thoughtful consideration. This represents a fundamental change in Alliance military strategy. We have traditionally emphasized defensive operations and measured responses, which worked effectively when facing opponents with limited capabilities and no external support, Sarah agreed. Enhanced pirate capabilities require enhanced response strategies. The debate continued for hours, with various representatives expressing concerns about the political and diplomatic implications of adopting more aggressive military doctrines. Sarah found herself defending not just tactical approaches, but fundamental human assumptions about the relationship between military strength and peaceful outcomes. The discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the Outer Rim. Admiral accepted the transmission, revealing the strained features of Captain, commander of the human escort vessel New Shanghai. Admiral reported, "We've encountered a situation that requires immediate strategic assessment. A convoy of civilian vessels has been captured by pirate forces using tactics and equipment far beyond anything previously observed." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This was exactly the kind of escalation she had been predicting. "Details, Captain," Admiral ordered. The attacking force included at least 12 vessels with military-grade stealth systems, coordinated electronic warfare capabilities, and weapons technology that disabled our escorts before we could respond effectively. The engagement lasted less than 10 minutes from first contact to complete tactical defeat. The silence in the conference room was profound. Alliance escort forces had never been defeated so decisively by pirate activity. Furthermore, Captain continued, the attacking vessels transmitted surrender demands in perfect Alliance standard, using military protocols that suggest formal tactical training. This wasn't opportunistic piracy. It was a planned military operation. Admiral's expression grew increasingly grim. Casualties: 3 escort vessels destroyed, 2 captured. Approximately 40 civilian vessels captured with crews totaling nearly 2,000 beings. The attacking force to unknown locations before additional Alliance forces could respond. After the transmission ended, the conference room erupted in urgent discussion. The scale and sophistication of the attack represented a fundamental change in the threat environment that Alliance forces faced. Sarah studied the tactical summary with growing recognition. The attack patterns, coordination methods, and equipment capabilities all suggested external support from a major military power. This wasn't enhanced piracy, it was covert warfare using proxy forces. "Admiral," she said, interrupting the general discussion, "this attack represents exactly the kind of escalation human military doctrine anticipates when external powers test defensive capabilities. The appropriate response is immediate and overwhelming retaliation." Ambassador's subjection was immediate. "Commander, retaliatory strikes risk escalating this situation beyond our ability to control it diplomatically." "Ambassador, the situation has already escalated beyond diplomatic control. External powers are using military force against Alliance civilians. Diplomatic responses will be interpreted as weakness and will encourage further escalation." Admiral supported Sarah's assessment. The attack's sophistication suggests significant external support. Traditional pirate forces don't possess the capabilities demonstrated in this engagement. Fleet Admiral made the decision that Sarah had been hoping for. "Commander, you will prepare an operational plan for locating and eliminating the forces responsible for this attack. I want recommendations for demonstrating Alliance military capabilities in ways that discourage further external intervention." "Yes, sir. I'll need intelligence assessments of potential external supporters and authorization to implement human tactical doctrine on an unprecedented scale." "Granted, how long do you need?" Sarah considered the complexity of the operation she was envisioning. 12 hours for preliminary planning, Admiral, but I need to be clear about the scope of what I'm recommending. Continue. Human military doctrine for this situation calls for what we term punitive expeditions operations designed to inflict casualties and economic damage far exceeding any possible benefits from continued aggression. The goal isn't just tactical victory. It's demonstrating that further escalation will be prohibitively costly. General or understood the implications immediately. You're proposing to deliberately escalate the conflict in order to discourage escalation. Exactly. Human military history demonstrates that showing willingness and capability to impose unacceptable costs prevents larger conflicts more effectively than showing restraint. The concept was foreign to Alliance military thinking, where escalation was generally considered something to be avoided rather than strategically managed. However, the success of human tactical approaches in recent operations had earned Sarah the credibility to propose radical changes to established doctrine. Admiral authorized the operational planning with one significant modification. Commander, you will have access to any Alliance resources necessary for this operation. However, I want detailed assessment of potential consequences and clear objectives for measuring success. Understood, sir. As the conference concluded and representatives dispersed to their various duties, Sarah began developing what would become the most ambitious military operation in Alliance history. The scale of retaliation she was planning would either demonstrate human strategic thinking definitively or end her career in catastrophic failure. That evening, working late into the ship's night cycle, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a dismissed observer struggling to earn basic respect from her colleagues. Now she was planning operations that would shape the Alliance's military future and possibly determine humanity's role in galactic civilization. The operation she was designing would test everything humans had learned about warfare over thousands of years of conflict. More importantly, it would test whether human military doctrine could be successfully applied on the scale required for major interstellar conflicts. Sarah had spent 8 years fighting pirates in the Outer Rim with limited resources and minimal support. Now she had the entire Alliance fleet at her disposal and authorization to demonstrate exactly what humans were capable of when given unlimited resources and clear objectives. Operation Thunderbolt launched 72 hours later with a force that had never been assembled in Alliance history. Sarah stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Galactic Sovereign, watching as 347 vessels from across Alliance space formed into the most powerful military formation ever deployed against pirate forces. The intelligence team had worked around the clock to identify the location of the forces responsible for the convoy attack. What they discovered was far worse than anyone had anticipated, a hidden military complex in the void reaches that suggested years of preparation by external powers for large-scale conflict with the Alliance. Final intelligence briefing, Admiral announced to the assembled fleet commanders via quantum communicator. Target designation, Firebase Omega, located in the system. Confirmed presence of military installations, fleet support facilities, and detention centers where Alliance civilians are being held. Sarah reviewed the tactical displays one final time, noting the defensive capabilities that their reconnaissance had identified. Firebase Omega was defended by over 200 vessels, orbital weapon platforms, and ground-based installations that would have challenged the Alliance's most experienced siege specialists. However, Sarah wasn't planning a siege. The operation she had designed would demonstrate human strategic thinking at its most fundamental level, overwhelming force applied with maximum efficiency to achieve complete tactical objectives. All fleet commanders, Sarah transmitted on the Tactical Coordination Channel, Operation Thunderbolt will proceed in 3 phases. Phase 1, systematic elimination of perimeter defenses using concentrated firepower. Phase 2, simultaneous assault on all major installations to prevent coordinated defensive response. Phase 3, complete neutralization of remaining enemy capabilities. Admiral, commanding the 2nd Fleet Contingent, acknowledged the tactical plan with professional approval. Commander, the scale of this operation exceeds anything in Alliance military history. Are you confident in the coordination requirements? Admiral, human military doctrine emphasizes that coordination becomes easier, not harder, when objectives are simple and overwhelming. Every unit has clear targets and straightforward mission parameters. The approach Sarah had developed was typically human. Instead of complex tactical maneuvering, she had planned an operation of such overwhelming scope that tactical sophistication became unnecessary. Firebase Omega would be attacked simultaneously from 18 different vectors by forces that outnumbered the defenders by more than 50%. "Commence Phase 1, Admiral ordered. What followed was unlike any military engagement in recorded galactic history. The Alliance fleet attacked Firebase Omega with such overwhelming coordinated firepower that the enemy's sophisticated defensive strategies became irrelevant. Perimeter defenses that had been designed to channel attacking forces into kill zones were simply obliterated by concentrated fire from multiple directions. Sarah watched the tactical displays with professional satisfaction as human military doctrine proved itself on an unprecedented scale. The enemy had prepared for traditional Alliance siege approaches. They had not prepared for 347 vessels attacking every defensive position simultaneously with maximum available firepower. "Phase 1 complete," reported Fleet Tactical Coordinator Lieutenant Commander. "All perimeter defenses eliminated. Enemy mobile forces attempting to regroup for defensive response." "Commence Phase 2, Sarah ordered. "All fleet elements engage assigned targets, maintain maximum pressure, do not allow enemy coordination opportunities." Phase 2 demonstrated the fundamental human strategic principle that had shaped Sarah's entire approach. Prevent the enemy from implementing planned responses by attacking faster and more aggressively than defensive coordination can accommodate. Across Firebase Omega, Alliance forces engaged every major installation simultaneously. The enemy's defensive strategy, which depended on coordinated response to sequential attacks, collapsed when faced with 18 simultaneous attacks that prevented coordination entirely. "Enemy command and control systems offline," reported Captain Us from his assault group. "Defensive coordination appears to have ceased." "Continue aggressive assault," Sarah replied. "Human doctrine emphasizes that the enemy is most dangerous when they believe they have nothing left to lose. Maintain pressure until complete tactical objectives are achieved." The engagement continued for 6 hours, with Alliance forces systematically eliminating every enemy capability with the kind of overwhelming thoroughness that human military experience had taught was necessary to prevent future threats. However, the most significant discovery came during Phase 3, when Alliance forces began detailed searches of the captured installations. What they found validated Sarah's worst predictions about external involvement in Outer Rim pirate activity. "Admiral," reported the intelligence team leader commander, "we've discovered evidence of systematic military support from the hegemony. Equipment, training materials, and communication records confirm direct hegemony involvement in recent pirate escalation." The silence on the command channel was profound. The hegemony was a major interstellar power that had been neutral in Alliance affairs for decades. Evidence of their secret military operations against Alliance interests represented a fundamental shift in galactic political balance. Sarah felt a cold satisfaction at the confirmation of her strategic assessment. The hegemony had been using pirate forces to test Alliance defensive capabilities while maintaining plausible deniability. Operation Thunderbolt had not only eliminated the immediate threat, but had also exposed the larger political conspiracy. "Furthermore," Commander continued, "we've located the Alliance civilians captured in recent attacks. Nearly 3,000 beings held in detention facilities throughout the complex. All appear to be alive and in acceptable condition." The successful rescue of captured civilians provided the political justification that Alliance leadership had needed for the unprecedented scale of Operation Thunderbolt. Sarah's aggressive strategic approach had achieved objectives that traditional Alliance diplomatic methods could never have accomplished. Admiral's response was immediate and decisive. "Prepare detailed intelligence summaries for transmission to Alliance Command. This information fundamentally changes our assessment of current threats and required responses." As Alliance forces completed mop-up operations at Firebase Omega, Sarah began receiving communications from across the galaxy. The scale and success of Operation Thunderbolt had demonstrated Alliance military capabilities in ways that would reshape diplomatic relationships throughout known space. Fleet Admiral of the Coalition transmitted formal congratulations on what he termed the most professionally executed military operation in recent galactic history. Admiral of the Free Worlds Association requested detailed briefings on human tactical doctrine for possible integration with their own military forces. Most significantly, the hegemony transmitted a formal diplomatic communication requesting immediate cessation of hostilities and negotiation of a comprehensive peace agreement. The speed of their diplomatic response confirmed that Operation Thunderbolt had achieved exactly the kind of escalation dominance that Sarah had intended. "Commander," Admiral addressed her privately after the main tactical briefings had concluded, "your strategic assessment proved accurate in every significant aspect. The hegemony was indeed testing our capabilities through proxy forces, and demonstrating overwhelming tactical superiority has discouraged further escalation." Sarah nodded respectfully. Human military doctrine emphasizes that potential enemies respect demonstrated strength more than diplomatic restraint. The hegemony needed to understand that covert warfare against alliance interests would be prohibitively costly. "Your approach has achieved strategic objectives that traditional alliance methods could not have accomplished. However, I need your assessment of long-term implications." Sarah had been considering this question since the operation began. "Admiral, Operation Thunderbolt will establish the Alliance as the dominant military power in this region of space. Other potential threats will conclude that direct confrontation with Alliance forces would be unsuccessful." "And the risks of this approach?" "Minimal, sir. Human experience demonstrates that showing capability to win decisively prevents conflicts more effectively than showing willingness to negotiate. The hegemony and other potential opponents now understand that the Alliance possesses both the military capability and strategic willingness to impose unacceptable costs on hostile actions." Admiral studied the post-operation intelligence summaries. "Commander, Alliance Command has authorized me to offer you a position that I believe you will find interesting." Sarah waited for the details, knowing that her career trajectory was about to change again. "Fleet Admiral is being reassigned to oversee integration of human tactical doctrine throughout Alliance military forces. You are being promoted to Admiral and assigned as Supreme Commander of Alliance Outer Rim operations, with authority over all military forces operating outside core Alliance space." The promotion was beyond anything Sarah had imagined when she first reported aboard the Sovereign's Pride 6 months earlier. From dismissed observer to Supreme Commander represented a transformation that reflected humanity's changing role within the Alliance. "Sir, I'm honored by the confidence, but I want to ensure that Alliance Command understands what they're authorizing." "Explain." "Human strategic doctrine for Outer Rim operations emphasizes proactive elimination of threats rather than reactive defensive measures. This approach will require significant changes to established Alliance military culture." Admiral's expression showed complete understanding. "Commander, Admiral, Alliance Command has concluded that significant changes to our military culture are exactly what current threat environments require. Your appointment represents institutional commitment to implementing human strategic thinking throughout Alliance forces." As the celebration continued throughout the fleet, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. 8 years of fighting pirates with inadequate resources had prepared her for challenges that Alliance officers with superior equipment and support had been unable to address. The bullying had stopped completely, replaced by genuine respect from beings whose species had mastered interstellar travel before humanity had discovered metallurgy. But more importantly, humanity had proven its value as more than just the member of the Alliance. Humans had demonstrated strategic thinking and military capabilities that enhanced the security of all Alliance member species. Admiral Sarah stood on the bridge of the Galactic Sovereign, watching Alliance forces complete the most successful military operation in recent galactic history, and began planning the strategic initiatives that would shape humanity's role in galactic civilization for generations to come. The war record that had once been dismissed as irrelevant colonial experience was now recognized as preparation for humanity's most important contributions to galactic peace and security. Sarah had proven that humans belonged not just in the alliance, but in its leadership, bringing strategic perspectives that complemented and enhanced the diplomatic achievements of older, more established species. The real test of human potential was just beginning, but Sarah was ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might offer. Humanity had found its place among the stars, and that place was at the forefront of galactic military excellence. One look at her war record had indeed stopped the bullying, permanently. The real test of human military capabilities was about to begin, and Sarah intended to make it a demonstration that would be remembered for centuries. The bullying had stopped, but the real work was just getting started. The real war was about to begin, and Sarah was ready to show the galaxy exactly what humans could accomplish when given the chance to fight on their own terms. But tonight, for the first time since arriving on the Sovereign's Pride, Sarah felt like she belonged.